My guest at this time is Christopher C. Horner. He's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the author of several climate policy-related books, and he served on the Trump transition landing team at the Environmental Protection Agency. We want to get his reaction to the Shut Down D.C. movement that turned the morning commute into a nightmare for many people in the nation's capital Monday. We also want to get his thoughts on the climate change movement turning to a 16-year-old in an effort to demonstrate the urgency of the issue. And Chris, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
Well, let's start with Shut Down D.C. They told us this was coming. They didn't say which intersections would be blocked, but a lot of people certainly found out Monday morning. Blocked several traffic roads and intersections in the nation's capital. They claim they're forcing people to confront climate change. They want to get them out of their comfort zone. Do you think it worked, or did they just make a lot of people angry today?
My read from social media, I did not bother driving in, but my read is that it backfired. It seemed pretty predictable. I don't think that this sort of, you're interrupting the lives of middle-class people who you're actually asking to pay a lot in the name of climate for no impact on climate, which I think if they get angry enough, they're going to look into this and find out. It's probably not the way to go. And it's driven by, you have no idea, but it's driven by some of the wealthiest names in our country, Hewlett, Rockefeller, and Bloomberg. And it's increasingly obvious that it is civil disobedience promoted by the state, which is really the best kind of civil disobedience if you think about it, right? It's not really civil disobedience at all. Schools, teachers are encouraging their kids to skip school and take part in this, and the reports are in of teachers bullying students who do not partake. This is a long-running playing out of that horrible ad, if you recall, from the UK, where these Hollywood luminaries, or the UK's version of luminaries, ran an ad in which one child raised their hand and questioned the dogma being crammed down their throat, and the teacher pressed a button and had the child explode all over the other children. This was an actual ad promoted by all of the UK's entertainment best and the brightest that they were just sure would capture the public, and in fact it horrified them. And I think what we're seeing with the disruption of people's lives, and then what you're seeing happen to children with one very high-profile example this week, people are seeing that this is abusive in numerous ways and probably going to backfire in a big way.
One of the other things I saw in social media footage, and this was just one intersection, so I don't know what it looked like in other parts of town, but there were banners at these intersections, one saying capitalism is killing the planet, and one next to it saying planet before profit. So we keep hearing that this isn't some sort of radical movement, but the activists themselves seem to suggest otherwise.
Right, and that's a great point, because I've been using images from these People's Climate Marches and the annual September Climate Week in talks for years, including two in the past week to Young America's Foundation, to show them, take a look, because for some reason the media avert their gaze with all of their encouraging, enthusiastic, cheerleading promotion of this. They somehow fail to point out what is an increasingly dominant theme, which is that this is, it's not about the climate. Again, as you and I have discussed many times, there's no dispute. There's no claim otherwise. None of these schemes ever proposed would actually detectably impact the climate. This is according to them. So they don't point to it. They elide it. But it's not about the climate. It never was. Climate change is, always has, always will. This is about what the party's pushing in. If you could just search Naomi Klein's book, Eco-Socialists Unite, Socialists of America have been embracing and promoting this because it was decided, there are numerous groups, the Club of Rome and others said that they needed something to rally the public behind to support their agenda, which is of an economic system that just has failed and proven very cruel to humans and so on. And yet the woman running this for the UN, Christina Figueres, said that, look, communism is the way. China's doing it. We all need to be China. Tom Friedman says, if only we could be China for a day and get what I want. I don't think he wants us to be China for a day to get what I want. I think he wants us to be China for a day to get, use tyranny to get what he wants from his, whatever that is, 20,000 square foot pied à terre in Bethesda. He won't feel the pain of this. So this has never been about climate. I've made that point to you over the years. But every now Climate Week, we're seeing increasingly signs that are somehow going to break their way through the media's lens here, and people are going to see this truly is what the far left is promoting as the vehicle to get what they want. Just one last point. Saul Alinsky had one of his themes was that the issue isn't the issue. It's like, he's big on ad hominem and isolate, personalize the target. That's a subject changer. It's a rhetorical fallacy. It's to change the subject. This is to change the subject. The subject is an economic system that Christina Figueres and others openly espouse. They need to revolutionize the economy of the past 150 years to this form of serfdom. And this is the way, through threat of famine, through panic, through fear. And there can be little doubt, based on what you're seeing, that has been present for years. That truly is what this is about. And I'm glad more and more of them are openly saying it. I just wish the media would stop turning a blind eye to them.
Chris, assuming there is no drastic action taken in the United States in the next few years, what's going to happen to this 10 or 11-year timeline that we're on now, where we have to turn back immediately or we go past the point of no return?
Probably nothing, and here's why. In the talk I just mentioned for YAS, which you can find it online, I showed how this is, in fact, a recycled headline. There's a great one that Bill de Blasio may have used to get his recent claim that we only have 10 years left, in which a scientist said humans only have 10 years left thanks to climate change. He wrote that 3.5 years ago. So we supposedly get 7, but they've been doing this. Prince Charles gave us 18 months back in 2004. Then he ran back out, said he corrected his maths, and it was 96 months. Then Gordon Brown said we had 50 days, and then we had months, not years, and then we had 100 months. Then we had 4 years when President Obama was elected. Then we had days, not weeks. And then just in 2016, we were given 4 more years. So my guess is they have never paid the price for these fairly near-term end-of-the-world claims, and so they won't next time. But I'm confident that the sky will be exactly where we left it in 10 years' time, and they will pay no price for this constant chicken littleism. Though I do think the price is they are like car alarms, and people just stop listening. But their idea seems to be, but if you repeat it often enough, you will convince just enough people to at least commit us to one of these perpetual programs. That is, nobody's ever going to do what they want right away, but they get these clever schemes like the Paris Climate Treaty, which is the treaty to end all treaties. It actually says you have now committed to every, I forget the number of years, ever tighter commitments in perpetuity. And in the U.S., we'll just call it not a treaty, and therefore we don't have to bother with the horrors of democracy and people opposing this. In the end, it's pretty clear. No free society really wants to do this to itself, and so that's why the fear.
We're talking with Chris Horner, Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And Chris, in our last couple of minutes here, I want to get your thoughts on Greta Thunberg. She's this 16-year-old Swedish girl who is now the cause celeb of the climate change movement. She sailed across the Atlantic because she didn't want to leave the carbon footprint or something like that to fly here. Now she's up at the UN for the opening of the UN General Assembly. Earlier on Monday, she took basically adults to task and certainly government officials to task. Here's what this 16-year-old girl had to say about how climate inaction has supposedly ruined her life.
I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So, Chris, on the one side, you've got folks saying the kids are going to end up making the difference here. They're the ones who are increasingly passionate about this. Other side saying, look, you're exploiting this teenager for the sake of trying to get this agenda done. What's your reaction when you see this and hear this?
So I wrote about what was going on in my book, Red Hot Lies, a few years ago, before I had children that were anywhere near that age. Now, as a father of two that are nearing that age, I found that heart-wrenching. I mean, I truly I'm disgusted by what's going on. I did point it out and joked about it several years ago when something like 20% of UK school children were reporting, actually it was much higher than that, were reporting nightmares because of climate change propaganda that was being crammed down their throats. You can't watch and listen to that young girl without being rather furious at the people who are doing this to her. And she is by no means alone. I, of course, think this is going to backfire, but this is a tragedy because, again, there are an awful lot. There was I wrote at the time about the first sort of the patient zero of this movement, these victims, was this child in Australia who had a meltdown and had to be institutionalized because he had been convinced that there was this ongoing ecological crisis just over the horizon, just as she's saying now 10 years later. And the poor child's life was ruined. Yes, her life has been ruined. I believe that. But not with what she is repeating back that people have done to her. And I just hope everyone pays attention to this. I mean, truly, enough is enough. If I could write about this 10 years ago, and again, it was much more isolated at the time. And now we see this. This is hard. Do you know, I have found, and I think we've covered this, this was actually called for by the plaintiffs' bar at a meeting in La Jolla, California in 2012. And I'm looking at the slide right now in which a law professor called for litigation using children as plaintiffs because it would be much more sympathetic. And in the slide, it says that what we'll do is, because democracy has failed us, and so we want the courts to design our laws going forward, we will link it to youth climate movement worldwide marches as part of a press strategy. This is from 2012. You hadn't heard about these things in 2012 because the plaintiffs' bar was just coming up with it. You're seeing the rotten fruit of that now. And I think this is absolutely disgraceful. And again, I hope everyone watches that this does not go for naught, what they've done to her. And the people watch this and finally say enough is enough is enough.
Chris, we'll call time there. Thank you, sir, as always, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Christopher C. Horner, Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, author of several climate policy-related books, including the one he just mentioned, Red Hot Lies. He also served on the Trump Transition Landing Team at the Environmental Protection Agency. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.